It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody, where every week we seek inspiration from great men and women to become the heroes and heroines of our own lives. And you are here with your hosts. I am Andrew Bernstein. You are Robert Begley. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing unbelievable, Andy. Happy to celebrate a man who might not have had a magnetic personality, but if you like physics, you know who he is. That's for sure.
Yeah, I thought you were going to answer the question by saying I'm electrified today. But any, but anyhow,
We'll merge those two
right,
realms, electricity and
right.
magnetism
We
today.
Exactly. We are talking about one of the greatest physicists of history, not as well known as he should be, but at the same level as Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein, and that's the great Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell. So that whose
Yes.
accomplishments just extend on and on. And I have to admit, Robert, right at the top, his breakthroughs in physics, like Newton and Einstein, who he's often compared to, it goes way over my head. I don't know what it means, but I know his work has had a profound impact on all physics that follows him.
Yeah, we wouldn't be brought to you in living color today if Maxwell didn't do the things that he did. Color was one of the his real revolutionary breakthroughs. Red, green, and blue are the colors that he put into specific pattern to have photographs be seen that way. Andy, what I'd like to do is have three main questions to answer because similarly to me, even though I did study electronics in school and had heard of Maxwell's equations, we're not going to go that deep into the physics of it, but some of the ways that we benefit. Some questions you mentioned at the beginning. What is it like to what's the stature of a person when they're in the same category as an Isaac Newton and an Albert Einstein? That's one thing. Another one, what's it like to meet your hero? We could use like sports analogies here, but Michael Faraday, who I studied, was a master in breakthroughs in electricity. Um, Maxwell met Faraday, who was 40 years older, and what's that like meeting your all-time hero? And then the third thing, Andy, is the integration between the physical sciences and what we'll call the social sciences or humanities. And why is it so often that we see some kind of like departure between the two in even the smartest kinds of people, which we can clearly identify Maxwell as one of those.
Oh, for sure. And so is if
Mhm.
people don't. Some people may not know Michael Faraday was also a brilliant scientist, one of the great physicists of history,
Yeah.
late 18th century, well into the 19th. You know, one thing when we discuss all of Maxwell's accomplishments today, Robert, it's
Mhm.
extraordinary that look at his lifespan. Was it 1831 to 1879? I mean, he died at
Yeah.
age 48. He was so young.
His,
He
his
did
mother died of
amazing.
cancer at 48, 49, and so did he. So that was sadly, did not imagine how much more he could have done. But but from an early age, though, his father took him when he was like 10 years old, Andy, to see some science exhibit, and the person leading it showed some demonstration of what electronics could do, and Maxwell was like hooked right there. Just from an early age, he it was like this was what he was going to do. He excelled in math. There were tutors in the house, and they thought he was dumb because they couldn't understand the question. They couldn't answer the questions he was asking, and they would like blame it on him. Imagine that. Like, why is the kid always asking me these questions that I don't see what they refer to in reality. When he was 8 years old, he was studying Milton, okay, the writer, the British writer. So as much as
Yeah,
we emphasize
Paradise
the
Lost
physical,
is not easy reading, for a lot of college kids, never mind for an 8-year-old.
and he starts winning prizes at math and English and poetry, and then when he's in his early 20s, he's solving the problem. This was one of the things that put him on the map. Saturn, the planet, what are those rings composed of? And there were all these different theories. And just by using mathematical equations, he said, no, it's not a solid ring and it's not a liquid either. It's these particles that are like compressed together, which was eventually would become the basis of magnetism that keeps them together. And he's 25 years old, and that's what really made him. You would think that might lead to a certain temperament where either they're spoiled. He had one sister who died very early, and not long after childbirth. So he was an only child in a well-to-do, relatively well-to-do family, and there could be that tendency to be like somewhat spoiled or antisocial. And he was not. He was certainly a quiet, cerebral thinker as a student. But yeah, he wrote these papers. He was too young to deliver the ideas himself. But by the time he
Yeah,
solved the
teenage. He was like in
Saturn.
his middle teens, right? When he was doing this.
By the way, I want to say one reason we chose him. I want to dedicate this episode. George Markland was a physicist, and we've had in his memory, he passed away earlier this year, and we promised to do a hero show, and his family are donors to Objective Standard Institute. And I asked who was one of his heroes, and they said Maxwell. And I was like, okay, this man, when especially doing research and how, like I said, how we benefit to this day from his achievements are some of the reasons why they warrant a hero show episode. So,
Mhm.
Andy, just going back
Yeah.
to, we're talking about some of his accomplishments, but this idea of in people's mind where you're revered by the scientific community, but the general public doesn't know you as well. And if we look at the idea of justice, is that what are your thoughts on that? Like, should this guy be known more outside the scientific community?
Well, I just want to plead ignorance of the facts first, since I'm a
Yeah.
writer and a philosopher.
Hmm.
I my my knowledge of the hard sciences is scanty, to put it mildly. So I can't speak from firsthand knowledge here. But from what I read about his accomplishments, let's just list a few of them. I mean, he's noted
Yeah.
for
Go ahead.
the classical theory of electromagnetism, right?
Yes.
Electromagnetic radiation, first to
Hmm.
describe electricity, magnetism, and light as distinct aspects of the same phenomenon. In the scientific community, he's considered his equations for electromagnetism are called the second great unification in physics. The first being accomplished by Isaac Newton. I mean,
Yes.
Maxwell demonstrated that electric and magnetic fields travel through space as waves moving at the speed of light. Can go on and on with the extraordinary accomplishments.
Mhm.
So I, given all of his achievements in the field of science, it's interesting. And he was in he was in Great Britain. Let's put that. He was in Britain, Scotland, or England in the 19th century. He should be a household name in the way everybody knows. If you mention Newton or Einstein, they may not know what the specific accomplishments were, but they know Newton and Einstein. They were great scientists. If you mention
Mhm.
Darwin, everybody knows he's a household name. Everybody knows Darwin was a great scientist, and they
Mhm.
know that he's linked to the theory of evolution. And But Maxwell's at that same level, as and in fact, when they did at the turn of the was it at the turn of the millennium when they did that poll among scientists, who are the greatest physicists of all time? Well, the top three
Mhm.
were Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and Clerk Maxwell. So he's, I mean, he's in exalted comfort, and he belongs there. When you look at his list of achievements, he belongs there. Stands the test of time, right? He dies in what was 1879. So in the year 2000, that's 121 years after his death. His accomplishments still lionized. He's they say the scientists say, not journalists or philosophers or poets,
Right.
scientists say, physicists say that that his the 19th century scientist who had the greatest effect, greatest impact, positive impact on 20th century physics.
Let's move on, Andy, to the question of meeting a hero. So he meets Michael Faraday, who was also a giant of the ages, and
Yes.
he had this incredible respect for him. And what is it like, just more broadly, to meet a hero of yours, and how can that inspire you when you're young and up and coming in life?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I have real life, units to to base my answer on
Mhm.
because when I was in high school,
Mhm.
I read Ayn Rand's novels, and everybody out there, if you haven't read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, in a way, I envy you because you have the unrepeatable opportunity to read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged for the first time. And I was a kid in Brooklyn. Ayn Rand was still alive, and and I met her, years later, uh, and
Mhm.
uh, and it was a powerful experience, because I I so love her novels and the philosophy that she
Mhm.
dramatizes in the novels. I mean, I knew
Mhm.
she was a real person, but actually meeting her and talking to her, however briefly, uh, on two occasions, just it concretizes. She's a real human being,
Mhm.
but the capacity for joyous living. She was so enthusiastic, she was just so delighted by the sheer little act of somebody getting her a glass of water. That struck me as like, wow, this is somebody
Mhm.
who's really lived,
Nice.
accomplished at a very high level, but knows how to live. It's just
Mhm.
passionate. I mean,
Mhm.
we need reason to figure out how to live. That's indispensable. Right? It's
Yes.
non-negotiable. But
Mhm.
joyous
Mhm.
living is the goal. And wow, she had the
Yes.
capacity for it. So yeah, that was very moving and inspiring.
So we can't. I can only extrapolate, what Maxwell felt, but I agree. I just think meeting a hero and seeing that they're human in the good sense, not in what is sadly often attributed to when they say people are human. It's the flaws that they highlight. But in your case, Andy, yeah,
Yeah,
you
and
got you
moral
got
and
to see them.
moral failings usually.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, just coming on to uh, something else that you had just touched on about reason, and last point I want to bring up is the difference between the physical sciences and the social sciences and their relationship to reason. And why is it that we see one physical sciences, computers, electronics, technology, just kind of skyrocketing as far as progress goes. But the social sciences, we just don't see that advance. You want to address that? And the reason I bring this up is Maxwell, in his own life, in his own personal life, he had kind of two sides, and one was very devout, incredibly religious, and then the other side was these landmark discoveries in physics. And is there a complete compatibility in those, or is there some kind of difference, for instance, in his own life or in the broader subjects at hand?
Yeah, I mean humanity, we've made vastly more advances in the sciences than we've made in the humanities. And I don't want to denigrate the humanities. There's been a lot of great work done. The field of literature is filled with brilliant works in painting, and there's we've done hero shows at any number, on Shakespeare and Hugo and Leonardo
Mhm.
and Michelangelo and so forth. But and in the field of philosophy, there's been great achievements. Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, and John Locke, and I would certainly put Ayn
Mhm.
Rand in that category. But still, we have it morally. We are not, as advanced.
What about the social scientists who call their ideas scientific? Okay. I mean, that's one of the things we hear, even, Marxism is scientific. And isn't that is that using reason, similar to physicists like Maxwell?
There's a saying, or an expression in philosophy that philosophic materialists like Marx and Skinner, people like that, and philosophic materialism, it means everything's matter. Period. Everything's matter. What we call the mind, the thoughts and emotions, are just neurons firing in the brain and so on. Everything's matter. That they have science envy. That you know that their belief is science advanced, like Maxwell, for example, because they're studying physical matter. They're studying physical nature. They've demystified it. Ironically, they took God out of it. Maxwell was so religious, but
Yeah.
he's studying physical matter, and you study it by empirical means. So, if man is nothing but a material being, then we could study man the
Hmm.
same way we study, atoms and and different galaxies
Right.
and different life forms and everything, and we could reach advances in the humanities. The materialists say, like we've done in the hard sciences. But notice. Notice they're ignoring an enormous aspect of reality. That is the mental world. The mental
Hmm.
world, when we introspect and are aware, directly aware of it, is not neurons fired in the brain. It's not electrical discharges up and down the nervous system. It's not material objects, macroscopic objects like this book.
Yeah.
It's thoughts and emotions.
Hmm.
They just push that aside on whim. We want, in effect, we want man to be all matter, so we could study him, like we could study, rocks and trees and and electrons.
Right.
He isn't. Oops. Well, we just push that aside. We just ignore this enormous aspect of reality. As one last point, I was saying this to the materialists. I say, guys, the mental world is just as real as the physical world. It's obvious. Just
Hmm.
introspect. Thoughts and emotions are not the same thing as this, and this isn't the same thing as thoughts and emotions. It shouldn't be that hard, but they're irrational. In other words, they're putting their own desires above and before the facts of reality. So, no, this is to answer your question. No, that's not reasoning. Reasoning, we come unprejudicially to the world, whether it's the inner world
Right.
or the outer.
To me, Andy, I'll just close on this. This is the value of integration in a person's life. Okay, knowing that reason applies in your own life, that's how we think, and whether it's about the physical world or just as you said, the internal, the non-physical world, and those
Yeah, the
aspects.
Yeah, and it's really important getting away from science here into psychology, morality, and just the humanities. But um, in conducting our own life,
Hmm.
if we're fully alive, we have strong emotions, and that's a good thing. Some people I hear
Yes.
some people say you're too emotional, and I'll respond to that say there's no such thing. There's no such thing as too much
Right.
emotion. Emotion is
Hmm.
our experience of life. You want to savor them. What there is too little rationality. There's too little reason, you know. And so
Hmm.
we need to use our rational faculty, which is the fact-based faculty. Look at the truth, even if it's painful. Why do I feel this way? Why have I been acting on this feeling? Have I been, violating the rights of innocent others based on this feeling? And we reason out. That's hard to do when your emotions are so powerful. But it's the human potential, it's the human ability, it's what makes us human. And we apply reason
Yeah.
to our own lives the way geniuses like Maxwell have, Newton and Einstein have to the
Hmm.
hard sciences. Then, as persons, the most important issue of all, our character can improve. We can improve our character dramatically, as one of our
Hmm.
heroes worked at. Right, Benjamin Franklin actually worked out a plan. The great scientist himself worked out a plan to develop his character. And I, by the way, I think we both recommend Robert. Everybody should read Benjamin Franklin's
Autobiography.
autobiography. Right?
Autobiography of
I mean,
Benjamin Franklin. Yes.
yeah, it's great in many ways, but it's so novel that somebody actually people will work on their bodily development, they'll work on their intellectual development. There's very few who realize you got to work on my moral development. And Franklin not only had the idea, but he had to develop a plan and he worked on it. And he
Yeah.
details it in his autobiography. And I think it's the first and the best of the self-help books. But
Self
yeah, we can work
development.
on
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
yeah. I have
Yeah. And
a rational plan to develop my character. But so that's
Yeah.
Franklin, like Maxwell, was a great scientist, and he put his
Great
reason forth not
scientist. And
just
Andy,
in
I
studying
would just,
electricity, but in studying also how
mhm.
to develop my character.
Yeah. So my last word on Maxwell is maybe there's not full integration, but you just identified it. Moral character is what helped him in his life to pursue this scientific knowledge, to come up with these ideas that would have massive impact for future scientists, physicists. And again, as you stated at the beginning, when somebody of the magnitude of an Albert Einstein has said, "You stand on the shoulders of Isaac Newton," and he says, "No, I stand on the shoulders of Maxwell." That puts this
Which
man
we
in a category that we have to pay
that
homage to.
that is a wow factor.
Yeah,
No, you got the
yeah,
wrong giant. Newton was a giant, but in this field, in this regard, Maxwell's the giant that I'm standing, on his shoulders.
yeah.
Einstein said that so many
Mhm.
words, and yeah, it's quite
Yes.
quite a tribute. We do what we can to bring justice to one of the greatest physicists of history. Uh,
Yeah.
he's in the
Mhm.
he's ranked in the top three. Again, this is the assessment of scientists around the year 2000. So it's not journalists making this call,
Right.
and it's
Mhm.
scientists, and it's 120 years after his death. So it shows his
Mhm.
his ideas have stood the test of time. Now Maxwell's ranked third in history of physics, which has been studied by human beings going back to the ancient world, third only to Newton and Einstein. So we're talking about one of the great giants in the field of science, who's not as widely recognized as he should be.
I think that's
About
it,
Maxwell?
Andy. I think man warrants a
Oh,
definitive
absolutely.
salute what he's
Absolutely.
done.
Say
So thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah, thank you, James Clerk Maxwell, because much of 20th century physics from which we benefit. You mentioned the radio, and
Yes.
television
Mhm.
came ultimately out of Marconi's American patent rights for the Radio Corporation of America, right? So much in as many
Yep.
things from which we benefited from, and just in everyday ways from Maxwell's work. So we say a big, hearty, grateful thank you to Professor James Clerk Maxwell, one of the great
Mhm.
physicists of history. So we will be back
Next,
next week
another. Yep.
again on the Hero Show. When we mingle in well-known heroes with little-known heroes, and scientists, writers,
Yes.
warriors, athletes, musicians, all different, every field of human endeavor, and you're always looking for greatness and for not just for the talent, Robert, but the hard work that people put into actualizing their talent. That living out Edison's famous dictum that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. That's what's so inspiring. So we'll be
Yes.
back next week once again on the Hero Show with another great hero or heroine to inspire us to be the best versions of ourselves. Have a heroic day, everybody.